25 years times an average of maybe 60,000 people dying a year for the flu. That's a lot of people dying. That's over 1 million people dying from the flu.
Right.
Why don't we have a couple of those patients?
Right.
We can't recall anybody.
Right. In this episode, I interviewed Dr. David Brownstein about his experience in clinical practice during the era of COVID. You might know Dr. Brownstein as the iodine doctor, as I have in the past, or you may know him for his popularization of the use of nebulized hydrogen peroxide. During this episode, we are not offering any type of medical advice or forming any doctor-patient relationships. This is purely educational. And we are not talking about the treatment of COVID. We are talking about how Dr. Brownstein treated his patients during the era of COVID. Dr. Brownstein is a board-certified family physician and is one of the foremost practitioners of holistic medicine. He is the medical director of the Center for Holistic Medicine in West Bloomfield, Michigan. He has lectured internationally to physicians and others about his success in using natural hormones and nutritional therapies in his practice. He's a graduate of the University of Michigan and Wayne State University School of Medicine, and he's a member of the American Academy of Family Physicians and the American College for the Advancement in Medicine. He is the father of 2 beautiful girls, Hailey and Jessica, and has been happily married to his wife, Allison, for over 25 years. Without further ado, here is Dr. Brownstein. During this critical time where our freedom of health and freedom of speech are both in imminent danger, and where tens of thousands of people are facing imminent job losses as a result of medical mandates, I am devoting my analytical skills full-time toward the battle for health freedom. This includes working directly with lawyers in lawsuits over mandates, lockdowns, and the current standard of care, scientifically analyzing safety, efficacy, and the risks of mandated medical treatments, you know what we're talking about, and their alternatives, as well as any way to mitigate their harms, and publishing my findings in scientific journals and sharing them with you. It is my firm conviction that this is the most important gift that I can offer the world right now, and I view this as a needed public service. I would be extremely grateful if you could support me during this time. At chrismasterjohnphd.com/support, you can purchase one of my information products in amounts ranging from $3 to $30, or take advantage of my consulting services for more. You can also make a purchase using one of my affiliate links to buy something you would have bought anyway at no extra cost to you. And finally, at chrismasterjohnphd.com/donate, you can make a donation in any amount. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe as well. And I thank you for your support.
So, I think to start off, I knew you from way back when at the Weston A. Price conference, hearing you speak about iodine. So I think of you as the iodine doctor. I have a couple of your books. One's on iodine, one's on thyroid. But we're going to talk about COVID today. And of course, COVID and iodine are not totally unrelated. But could you give us just a general sense of who are you in your clinical practice on a day-to-day basis? What does that look like?
Well, I am a board-certified family doctor, and went into medicine to be a board-certified family doctor, and just modeled after my family doctor. And then, I had my eyes opened up to a different way of approaching medicine. That's instead of using drugs that poison enzymes and block receptors in the body, I try and use things that actually support the biochemistry and physiology. And been doing it for close to 30 years. And so I work full time, see patients, and I like what I do. And I don't know if it's been as much fun the last 18 months as the other years have been, but it's you know what, I'm happy with what I do, and like taking care of people.
Was there any particular turning point where you decided you wanted to go in that direction that you mentioned, away from drugs and towards supportive nutrients, or was that a philosophical position that you always had?
So I went to medical school to be modeled after my family doctor, and I grew up in a conventional household. We didn't take any vitamins or minerals. We didn't eat holistically or anything like that. We just kind of ate a typical American diet, which probably I know wasn't the greatest. And so I finished I wanted to be a family doctor. That's why I went into medicine and went to residency, and went to a family practice residency and started practicing family practice medicine. And around 6 months into that practice, I started to lose sleep for a couple of nights for an unknown reason. And after 3 or 4 nights of not sleeping well, I'm getting up and getting ready to go to work. And I just blurt out to my wife, I don't want to be a doctor anymore. And, you know, we've known each other since we were 18 years old. This is all I wanted to do since I was younger than that. And I worked hard to get there. And we had $100,000 in student loans at the time. And, you know, she's like, what's wrong? And I said, I'm not helping people. And she goes, what do you mean? I said, all I'm doing is giving them drugs that are not treating the underlying cause of their problem. And I'm having to give them more drugs to treat the problems from the first drugs. And I said, I don't think people are getting better. And I can't do this for the next 30 years. She said, what are you going to do? And I'm like, I don't know, but I can't do this. And she said, well, why don't you do another residency? I'm like, they're all the same. I'm not going to do another residency. That was enough work. So I was floundering. And the short version of the story was I happened to meet a chiropractor, and I never referred to a chiropractor before in my life. And I used to tell people don't go because I thought they were dangerous, even though I never went to one or knew what they did. And his name was Dr. Robert Radke, and him and I hit it off just as friends right away. And he, at this meeting that I met him at, he brought me a book called Healing with Nutrition by Jonathan Wright, who's an allopathic physician. And I took the book home and I read the chapter on heart disease, which was interesting to me because my father had suffered with severe heart disease. He had his first heart attack at 40, second heart attack at 42. Over the intervening 20 years, he had a couple of bypass surgeries, angioplasties, and he, at that point in my time in life, he was on 12 medications for blood pressure, hypertension, and diabetes. And he looked terrible. He was pale and pasty. He was having continual angina for 20 years. He was taking nitroglycerin pills multiple times on a daily basis for any type of activity because he would get chest pain. And we were all just waiting for the phone call that he died. And so I read that chapter. I read it till 2 a.m. I read it twice. And I get up to go to work. I call him on the way into work, or at work. That might have been before cell phones. And I said to him, hey, Dad, I want you to come in and get some blood work. So he pops in the office, he gets some blood tests, and I get the results back. And from the results and from what I read in that book and knowing my dad, I put him on 2 things. I put him on natural thyroid hormone and natural testosterone topically. And within 7 days, his testosterone levels in the blood work were below detectable limits, so near zero. His thyroid levels were in the reference range, but in the low part of the reference range, in the high and low. And from 7 days later, after putting him on those 2 things, his 20-year history of angina went away, never to return. Never used another nitroglycerin pill. He looked better and acted better. He called me up after 7 days and said, I didn't take a nitro today. And I thought that was interesting. And next day he calls me up, still haven't taken a nitro, and I feel better, got more energy. And 30 days later, I have him redraw his blood work, and his cholesterol, which was in the 300s on medication, 300s on medication, went below 200 without changing any of his bad habits. And my dad could eat like the best of them. He smoked. He was overweight. Never exercised a day in his life. Once I saw the changes in my dad, I realized that's what I should be doing in medicine. And I pretty much did a 180. And I left the practice where I was at and started researching and learning and reading and going to conferences on how to support biochemistry and physiology and not use things that poison and block it. And every patient since then gets a thyroid and hormonal workup. So that takes me to today with what, holistic practice of trying to use things that actually support human physiology and biochemistry.
Yeah. Yeah. The cholesterol connection is interesting because whenever I see high cholesterol, I would immediately think of how's the thyroid doing? Because if I come from a background of understanding molecular biology and stuff like that. I know the LDL receptor, which controls the clearance of cholesterol from the blood, is directly regulated by thyroid hormone. So thyroid hormone, even in the normal range, is going to control your cholesterol levels. But let's fast forward to either late 2019 or early 2020, you realized for the very first time that maybe you heard about COVID or whatever in the past couple of weeks or months, but now you realize for the very first time that you're going to wind up with a COVID patient. What's the first thing that goes through your head?
Oh, look, I remember the report at the end of December of 2018, I believe, right? Started in 2019. 2018, December 2018, China reported 3 or 4 atypical pneumonia cases from a novel strain of coronavirus. And I remember when it happened. I remember following every report coming out after that and thinking, I wonder if this one will stick. And then we all know what happened in January. Went to Italy and Spain, and Europe started first. And then in February, I believe the end of February were the first cases in the U.S. On the West Coast. And at that point, it was a matter of time coming to the United States, and not coming, spreading through the United States. And if we had a well-functioning CDC, Center for Disease Control, when those first cases came on the West Coast, they would have quarantined those people, and they would have quarantined their contacts, and we could have maybe bought ourselves some time. But we didn't, and we don't presently either. And, we all know what happened after that. So, look, I found all those reports. I was seeing the news feeds out of Italy and the hospital ward rooms. Every 2 feet, there's a bed with someone on a ventilator, and you're seeing the pictures of the bodies under the sheets, stacked up and, stacked next to each other, and the trucks, the cold trucks gathering the bodies. And, so we, the headlines here were disastrous, that there's no treatment. The modeling out of England said we're going to have, I believe, 1.5 million dead by the end of the year and 3 million infected or something like that, around those numbers. And so February's rolling on. The first 3 cases are on the west coast of United States, I think Seattle and California. And, it was a matter of time. So there were, towards the end of February, I believe there were cases on the East Coast in New York, New Jersey, Massachusetts, and then maybe a case in Michigan, near where I live, either the end of February, beginning of March. And so it was the end of the work week. It was either the end of February or first weekend of March. And my office manager came to me, and there, it was about an hour to go, and said, "You got to talk to the staff. They're going to walk." I'm like, you could feel the tension. I mean, the tension was everywhere. It wasn't just in our office. It was everywhere. We all felt it. You go to the grocery store, it didn't really matter. There was tension everywhere. And we all saw the headlines. All the headlines were, "There's nothing we can do. It's going to kill millions and millions of people. And, this is going to be a worldwide catastrophe." There was nothing good reported. So we had a meeting with my staff at the end of the hours on Thursday. And I opened it up and I said, I can feel the tension here. Let's talk. What's on your mind? So the first question that came to me is, when are we closing down? And I said, literally, I hadn't even thought about this. And I was incredulous. I said, closing down? Why are we going to close down? I said, we actually have therapies for people sick with viral illnesses. We have therapies that support their immune system. And I said, we've been doing this for close to over 25 years. And I said, every flu season across the United States, anywhere from, the low amount, 20 or 30,000 to the upper amount, 100,000, maybe 120,000 Americans die from the flu-like illnesses every single year. Now, if we heard about in real time, every one of those people dying, we'd be panicked 24/7, all the time. But we didn't, that's kind of life for us. And so I've been, between me and my 2, longest partners, we have 100 years of experience between us. So over this time period of close to 25 plus years that we've been together.
You mean running in parallel? Is that the 100 years? Or?
And together in an office and sharing the same basic philosophies. And, we've got about 100 years of experience between us doing, virtually, we're all different physicians, but we do the basic same things. Right. And our patients aren't hospitalized, our patients don't die, and our patients don't get severely sick with flu-like illnesses when we support their body's immune system. And none of us can recall.
So, just out of curiosity, over the course of those decades, how many flu patients have died?
Well, none of us can recall anyone dying.
You might have zero flu patients who have died.
Maybe we have a few. I don't know. I can't recall anyone dying from it. Right. My partners can't recall anyone dying from it. I'm sure I've had a few hospitalizations over the years. I can't recall anybody. Right. It's certainly not been in my recent.
You have good reason to believe that you have a much better track record than the average when it comes to the flu, and so you didn't.
Well, we've seen it.
Pretty confident going forward for this as well, right?
So if you think about it, Chris, 25 years. Let's call it 25 years. It's a little more than that, but 25 years times an average of maybe 60,000 people dying a year for the flu. That's a lot of people dying. That's over 1 million people dying from the flu.
Right.
Why don't we have a couple of those patients?
Right.
We can't recall anybody.
Right.
So I said to the staff, well, we've got it. I brought these numbers up to them and I said, we know how to treat people sick with viral and or bacterial illnesses. And I said, I can't promise you anything with this strain of coronavirus because we've never treated it. I don't think we have, but undoubtedly we've treated other coronavirus strains since 1/3 of flus and flu-like illnesses are coronavirus every season. So why wouldn't they respond to our therapies just like the other strains have? I'm not worried about it. And I said, if it doesn't work, we're nimble enough. We'll figure it out. We'll change it up. We have enough things to do to support the immune system. I said, close the office. I'm not closing this office. And I said, I'm not going to make anybody work. If you're scared and you can't work and you'd rather stay home, that's your choice. And no one's job will be at risk, and no one's job was at risk. And I said, for those who want to work, we'll do the job. And if no one wants to work, I'll come here myself. I'll give the IVs myself. I will do as best I can do until either I get sick or they won't let me. And so we ended up, the end of the meeting, we ended up with about probably 50% of our staff decided they wanted to stay home. They were just too scared. And the other 50% worked. And we kept our doors open from day one. It was probably the following week or the week after that we saw our first patients. And, we started doing what we always do. And in normal years, what we did was we had patients come in the office. We'd see them. They'd be hacking and coughing. They wouldn't be wearing a mask most of the time. I don't recall anyone wearing a mask past years. And I wasn't wearing a mask. I wouldn't even put on gloves. I would listen to them. I'd palpate their neck and look in their throat and listen to their lungs and, do what I was trained to do. Then I'd wash my hands before I touch them, wash my hands after I touch them, and I'd go about my day. And so, we talked about how to treat these patients, and, we didn't want to bring them in the office just because this seemed more severe. So we decided we'd treat them outside, and we treated them outside in their cars, and that started in March. And in March in Michigan is not a nice time. It's winter weather, cold, snow, ice, sleet. It's not nice weather. And, we had cars lined up that needed.
Did you have masks? Did you use masks?
We used masks. We were outside. We put on full, PPE gear at that time. And we had face shields. We made the patients put on masks. We made them stay in their cars. And so we had to give them an ozone shot, and then they had to get out of their cars and drop their drawers and put their butt out. But so we treated them, and we treated them through cold weather. We treated them through warm weather. And the first week we started the therapy, I was worried. I didn't sleep. I did not sleep that whole week. I wasn't sure it was going to work. I didn't know. And I thought, oh my God, what if this doesn't work? What if these people die? And I didn't think our therapy was going to make it worse at all. But, what if it doesn't work? I didn't know. And then, a few days after we started, I called every patient. I'm still doing that, where I call these patients every day till I'm sure they're out of the woods. And so after working a full day, I come home and I call patients. How are you doing? What's going on? And so I called them, and after a few days, things are better. I can breathe better, because breathing was the big issue, particularly a year ago, year and a half ago. and their pulse, they were following their pulse ox. They would give me the numbers, and they were getting better. And then after about a week, everything settled down. We were in our routine. We knew what we were doing was working. The same therapy of using high dose oral vitamins A, C, D, and iodine, a dilute solution of nebulized peroxide and iodine. And for those that came in the parking lot who needed more therapy or were sicker, we gave them IVs of hydrogen peroxide, vitamin C, and ozone butt shots, in the rear end. And we've had the same therapy for 25 years with little variations as we learn new things. But basically, we've had this same therapy for at least, what are we in 2020? At least 10 to 12 years, because nothing had really changed.
So this is exactly what you would have been doing for flu and flu-like illness?
Now, look, over the years, I never concerned myself whether they had a strain of coronavirus or they had influenza A or influenza B or RSV or whatever. It didn't really matter to me. I would treat them the same way because the immune system responds the same way to viral infections. It doesn't matter what the name of it is.
Yeah. So this is an interesting difference between your approach and mine, where I think in this case, yours kind of wins out. So when COVID first struck, I was like, okay, what do we do about this? And my initial instincts, and I'm a very mechanistic thinker, so my initial instincts are to say, okay, what's the same and what's different about this virus? And so there are some things that are different. So for example, if you look at how it gets into cells, it uses ACE2. Influenza viruses don't do that. Cold viruses don't do that. And there are some other differences too. So for example, there are some animal experiments that suggest that interferon is protective against mice that have the flu, but it'll kill mice that have not all coronaviruses, but SARS and possibly COVID. And so I'm like, well, I don't want to do anything that's going to increase ACE2 too much because I don't know what's going to happen. I don't want to do anything that's going to boost interferon too much, so I don't know what's going to happen. And a lot of the things that I was a little worried about fat soluble vitamins at that point because usually my instinct would be vitamins A and D for sure for cold and flu, but those can impact ACE2 and some other things that people use as immune boosters can boost interferon. But then as more and more data came out, like nothing that I was concerned about actually panned out. So I think nothing's more clear than vitamin D is very protective, but there's also very good studies on vitamin A and even things that are known to boost interferon. They all seem protective of COVID. So if I had taken more of your approach, let's just do what we always did, it would have worked out better than the way that I was thinking about it.
Well, I mean, look, we were all trying to do the best we could do. Look, conventional doctors are trying to do the best they could do. The 88% who died from being ventilated, those doctors in the hospital ventilating those patients were trying to do the best they could do. You know what? I'm not casting stones to anybody here. And, my premise was I knew a third of infections were coronavirus strains. And I know, look, each virus is different than another virus. But what I've learned over 30 years, Chris, you could try and micromanage diabetes. You could try and micromanage hypertension. And you know what comes out of that later is, hey, we can't micromanage it. The patient doesn't do well when you have this tight blood sugar control in diabetics. There's more deaths to do it that way. In hypertension, drop the blood pressure low enough, there's more problems, especially with old people. So, my basic premise has been what supports the body, what supports the immune system, what gives the body its basic raw materials it needs to do its job, whether we're talking hypertension or diabetes or fighting viral infections or fighting a strain of coronavirus. And I think that we were designed with some pretty good care that if we just support it, body can really do some pretty good wonders on its own. And it's when we start blocking things and poisoning things that we start seeing the problems. And that's how, 99% or maybe it's higher than that of drugs work by that. And that's why there's, so many side effects and so many problems with drugs. And, in med school, we weren't taught, we were just memorizing drugs and categories. And, we did memorize side effects of drugs, but they weren't emphasized. It was just, they have this, you give them this, they have that, you give them that. You don't think. You're just, it's rammed into your head not to think, and that's what you do. regardless. And when you look at the body and you look back at biochemistry and the biochemistry pathways, I think if we just support it up, the body can really take it on its own. And look, I was worried about those ACE2 receptors when we started this thing. I did not know if this thing was going to work, but I fell back on 25 years of experience with it. I can't believe this is going to harm anybody. That's how I felt. I was really strong. I was sure it was going to help people. I just couldn't believe it could cause harm. I just couldn't believe it. Not from the mechanisms that I've studied with it.
And I believe you have.
We're not helping. We got to find another mousetrap here.
Yeah, and you have some good numbers on your side, right? So how many patients did you treat, and how many hospitalizations do you have? And
well, we take call every 2 weeks. So we have this call phone that we pass around. And I got the time bomb the last 2 weeks, which flew over Thanksgiving. And in Michigan, we were leading the country in COVID cases the last probably few weeks. And man, that's all I've been doing the last few weeks. So the number's over 800 now. I don't have an exact number for you because I'm still recovering from my 2 weeks of call and I haven't had
Yeah.
But through Thanksgiving weekend, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday, I was outside doing IVs. I got some help on Sunday and I couldn't, people were on vacation or we had illness in our office this last 2 weeks and we had a bunch of flu, which I think was flu because we already had COVID through our office a year ago. And so a bunch of my staff got flu. So my nurses were sick. So I was out there in the dark, having people shine their cell phones, over the veins so I could put an IV in them and, do it. So we're in the 800s now. We have 11 hospitalizations, and we have 0 deaths of our patients. So we
that's pretty remarkably lower hospitalizations and deaths than any statistics from anything, right? So it's not a randomized study, but it's a pretty remarkable deviation from the average.
Let me give you a randomized study. So there's a randomized component to this. So at the beginning of COVID, when I was blogging and posting and doing interviews with people and saying, hey, there's still hope out there when there was no hope out there, and saying, here's what we're doing. Let me interview this patient who got better, who had a pulse ox in her 70s and went up. So I published a study on 107 patients. Our first 107. We had 0 deaths and I can't remember the hospitalizations. It's in the article. And so one of the hospitalizations was, that occurred afterwards. But anyways, this is my randomized part of my trial. So after I published the study, we got COVID in our office, and COVID started. So here we are through February of 2020 till September of 2020. No one in my office is sick. It was amazing. We didn't have a cold. We didn't have anything. We're treating all these sick people outside. So I get a call one morning from my oldest employee, my longest serving employee. And she says, I can't smell, I can't taste, I got a fever, I'm coughing, I'm sick. I'm like, you got COVID, take our protocol, and I can give you IVs after work. Of course, stay home till you're better, and I'll call you every night. And so 6 a.m. she calls me. So I get to work, I open the door, all the lights are on. And I'm like, that's unusual because she usually opens the office up. I look down the hall and she's in the office. And I said to her, I just spoke to you an hour ago. Why are you here? I had to get something. I said, no, you had to get nothing. I would have put whatever you wanted outside the door. What do you get? You get what you're getting and get out of here. You're going to get us all sick. And she goes, nobody's here. I'm like, I'm here. And they're all coming in about 20 minutes. And she got whatever she's getting, walked out. And so she went home. And so we were, of course, we all got sick 4 or 5 days later, and it banged around her office for the next little bit. And so she was hospitalized for 8 days, and she was almost ventilated. It was a mess. And as I'm talking to her every night, I'm saying, hey, how are you feeling? And she says, worse. She's breathing worse. She didn't have a pulse ox, which, her granddaughter who works in our office was telling me she's worse. finally I called her up and she's just incoherent. And I said, give me the phone to your granddaughter. And I said, call 911. So she goes to the hospital and she's there for 8 days. And her granddaughter comes into work the next day. And I said to her, I don't understand this. How did that happen? All our patients do fine. Now, why didn't she come for any IVs? Because she wouldn't come for any IVs. And she says, well, not only did she not come for IV, she wasn't taking your supplements. I'm like, what do you mean? She took one vitamin C pill on the first day, and then she said she's not taking anything else. Why? Because that's grandma. And so I was blinded. I didn't know she didn't take anything. So it's a blinded study, single blinded study.
Yeah.
And it's randomized. She's my randomized subject. So she was hospitalized. So in our study now, 100% of people who didn't take the protocol were hospitalized, and markedly lower percent were not hospitalized. So that's my single blinded randomized study.
Yeah. Okay. So you mentioned that you mentioned publishing the first paper with the 100-something patients. I saw you talked at the conference. I saw, and also when I Googled your name, it was the first result. You had some run-ins with, was it the FTC or?
Yes.
What was that all about? Yeah.
So when we saw our therapy working, the headlines, the headlines were terrible. We all lived through it. And what state are you in, Chris?
I'm in New York City right now.
So New York City, come on, you remember the headlines. The headlines were Michigan, New York, New Jersey, and Massachusetts. We were the big four burning states, at the beginning of COVID. And, New York was setting up the ship in the harbor to take the excess patients. And we were setting up Ford Field as a hospital ward, to treat patients. So, and there were refrigerator trucks ordered for all the excess bodies they thought were going to occur with this. The headlines were terrible. We were all locked down and, everybody's scared out of their minds. There's no toilet paper, even though there's no more asses in this country, there's no toilet paper for some reason. But, I thought I was doing a good thing and saying, hey, our patients are getting better with this therapy. There was nothing out there. There was no randomized. There was no non-randomized studies.
And where did you put this? Was this on a blog or was it in a journal? Or?
And I was blogging and I was interviewing my patients as they got better. And I would interview them, and I was the interviewee. I was the interviewer. They were the interviewee. And I was just asking them, tell me your story. And I was in the background. I would just, what made you feel better? What was your pulse at? And I just let them do their story. So this went on for, I don't know, maybe a month, 6 weeks. And then it was patient after patient that was getting better and was not being hospitalized. And they had low pulse oxes, some in the 70s, some in the upper 60s. And, they would have went in the hospital in the 60s and low 70s. These people would have been ventilated. And there was an 88% you were dead at that time if you got hospitalized with it and ventilated. I don't remember now the exact time frame, but about 4 to 6 weeks into this, out of the blue, I get a letter from the Federal Trade Communication. And actually, here's how the letter came. The letter came in junk mail. My wife, who looks at this, saw it and thought it was just junk. She wasn't even going to open it. She opened it and she read it. She's an attorney. And I remember it was a Tuesday. It's my long day at work. So I saw patients all day, went outside all day. After work, we stayed and gave IVs at night, with some of us holding flashlights so others could see and put the IVs in. And I think I walked in at 8:30, 9 o'clock, and I'm just a wet noodle, just had enough. And, there was snow on the ground because I remember my shoes were dripping, and I'm standing there with my bags, and my wife and daughter, who was living with us at the time, were looking over the computer, and I see this look on their faces. And at first I thought somebody died. I'm like, what's wrong? And she says, take off your coat and sit down. And I said, is everybody okay? She goes, yes, just come over here. So I'm still standing there. I'm like, what is wrong? Look, what's wrong with you guys? And so she tells me, you got a letter from the FTC. And I said, the FTC? Which FTC? She goes, the FTC. I said, the federal government? She goes, yeah. I said, who's it addressed to? You. And she starts telling me what it says. And it was 4 pages. You Google my name, you can find it. It's 4 pages.
I think it's the top result if you Google your name, actually.
It's single space, bullet pointed. And they went through those interviews and picked out lines they did not like. And so they called them advertisements. Now, I never considered those interviews advertisements. I haven't taken a new patient in years. My practice was full. I was just trying to put information out there. Hey, there's nothing here for this illness. There's nothing we can put back on.
I'm looking at this letter right now, and they say, in marketing materials titled, you claim.
Marketing material.
Marketing materials, yeah.
Marketing materials. Yeah, that's marketing materials. I thought I was doing the right thing. I remember in med school, the professor's telling you, report your findings, whether positive or negative, so other doctors can
case report.
And, it's important you report your findings so other doctors can learn from you. Important to report your negative findings as well as your positive findings.
Right.
So, I read the letter and, I feel like vomiting. And I said, I don't understand this. Well, what is this? So my wife says, they think she explains it to me 3 times in a row. They're calling it. I said, this is not advertising. I'm just reporting. I'm interviewing patients. I'm reporting what we're doing in our practice. I'm not telling any patients to come here. We're not taking new patients with COVID. I never said that. We're not. And so she explained it 3 times to me, and then whatever. And they said you have 48 hours to remove this, or you're here for the U.S. Justice Department. So, we talked about it, and we all agreed just remove everything. So we just took down 20 years of blogs and just took everything down. Because they can consider anything an advertisement, which I didn't know. And
so you took down everything related to COVID.
Everything related to anything.
Okay.
So I took everything down, and so my wife sent a letter to the attorney who signed the letter from the FTC and said, something like, is this sufficient that we complied? He said, yes, you've complied. So then in the letter, in the letter, it says, because there's no studies, they didn't studies, that's how they referred it. Because there's no studies saying what you say works, therefore any mention of vitamins A, C, D, iodine, it doesn't really matter. Any mention of anything that works for treating COVID falls in violation of federal code, blah, 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 blah. Well, number one, I never said I was treating COVID. I said I was supporting the immune system. I had sick patients who happened to have COVID, and I didn't care what the hell they had, because I would treat them the same way, whether it was influenza A, B, RSV. I would treat them the same way. So I was just the same therapy we've done for 20 plus years. And so because there's no studies, so I put a note on my website saying, no more emails, no more interviews, everything's down. Here's the link to the FTC article you want to. I think I posted it on there. So I heard from a few friends of mine said, why don't you give them a study? You have enough patients. So I wrote that study up of 107 patients, got it peer reviewed, got it published. Once it was published, my wife sent another letter to the FTC and saying, you said there's no studies. Here's a study. We want to publish this on our website without commentary. The answer came back, no, it's not a randomized placebo-controlled study. Well, that's not what you said in the original letter. So they moved the goalpost back 30 yards where it was. And so at that point, we hired a First Amendment lawyer. So for $980 an hour, we got to hear a First Amendment lawyer who deals with the FTC and his opinion. And, I told my wife, let's keep the questions short because every answer is going to cost us. And the end of it came where he said to me, you have to make a decision. What do you want to do here? You can, if you keep posting, they're going to go after you. And so he said, I advise you, if you want to still see patients and treat them, he goes, you don't have First Amendment protection to talk about this. He says, I've been doing this for 40 years. I've never seen anything like this. And he said, your First Amendment protection is gone right now. He goes, you should have it. It should be fought to the Supreme Court. It'll cost you tens of millions of dollars to do this if you want to do this, and I'll be your lawyer for it. But he says, if you don't have tens of millions of dollars, my advice is just take everything down and leave it down. And he goes, they're going to call anything you do or say an advertisement. So that's what we did, and that's where I am at.
So if someone wants to see the protocol that you're using, is there anywhere to see it? You have the published paper? Is that
the article's published?
What journal is that in? Or where is it published?
I'm looking for it right now on my messy desk. If you Google my name and COVID article, it'll come up, and I can send it to you, and then you can put it up.
Yeah, I can post it in the show notes.
Science, Public Health and the Law, I think, is the name of the journal.
Let me see how easy it is to find. Public Health and the Law. All right, so I know there's two aspects of your protocol that I really want to talk about before we run out of time. And so the first one is the nebulized hydrogen peroxide. So I know that I had many people ask me about nebulized hydrogen peroxide over the past, 6 months to a year. And I believe you had popularized it, and I know you did an interview with Mercola and et cetera. So I don't know anything I don't even own a nebulizer. Is the nebulized hydrogen peroxide, is that something that has to be done under medical supervision, or is that something that anyone can just have as a home remedy for when they get sick?
Well, I think I think the best outcome will be to work with a physician who's knowledgeable about the therapy that he or she is prescribing, and not do this on your own. And no, I don't recommend people do it on their own. I recommend working with a physician. So, nebulized peroxide's been used for a long time for, treating different things. Hydrogen peroxide's been used intravenously for almost 100 years for treating pneumonia and other.
And when you administer it, are you having the patients do it themselves at home, or are they coming in to get the treatment?
Intravenously, we're administering it. Nebulizing, they can do it at home.
Okay.
We don't want them in the office doing it, spreading, if they're sick.
Right.
So it's a 0.03% dilute solution of hydrogen peroxide on normal saline, with 1 drop of 5% Lugol's in there, which is 6.25 milligrams of iodine and iodide. And that's what they nebulize that solution. And again, work with their doctor, on this.
Yeah. How long does someone use that for?
I have my patients do when they're sick, particularly with breathing problems, is use it every hour, waking hour, until they're better.
And so let's say someone came in to you with COVID, and they just test positive.
Let's keep this straight for the powers that be. I'm not treating COVID. I'm treating the immune system. I'm just supporting the immune system, and it doesn't matter to me what the illness is.
Got it. Okay.
Well, you can talk COVID. I mean, COVID's out there.
Right. Okay. So at that point, is that something where you're forget COVID? Is that something where you're thinking, this person has a viral infection, they need this to support it, or are you coming from a place where this person has respiratory distress and it would support it in that case?
Certainly in respiratory distress. Look, they can have respiratory distress from other things too, from chronic obstructive pulmonary disease, from asthma, from lung cancer with the impact of blood flow or airflow into the lungs and things like that. So I've had people nebulize peroxide for all these different conditions, and the dilute solution of peroxide is not hard. I can't recall anyone besides a little sore throat or scratchy throat. Mm-hmm. Once in a blue moon, it triggers excess coughing. That's a blue moon. I mean, it's not many people. Beyond that, there's really no adverse effects with it. Sometimes it doesn't help. I mean, no therapy helps every single person out there, but the vast majority of people get help with it, whether we're talking about viral infections, whether we're talking about COPD, asthma, lung cancer, any where the lungs are, where the respiratory tree is got mucus or just not functioning as well as it should function. This nebulizing helps the sinuses for sinus infections. It helps sore throats. If you have an infection in your throat, anywhere in this this area of the body, I think this nebulized solution is really helpful, which is what flu and flu-like illnesses generally hit people with.
And so for the Lugol's, one thing that I started, started talking about in May of 2020 was using povidone iodine solution, because there were some papers that came out that showed that it killed the virus. Since then, there's been 7. Last I looked, as of September, there were 7 randomized controlled trials that looked at mostly 1% povidone iodine solutions, although there was 0.5% and a couple others. And most of them were just looking at like changing a positive test to a negative test or something like that. But there was one that came out in an obscure Bengali journal that showed an 88%. They were treating 1,200 people by telemedicine. They were randomized to either be told or not be told to use a 1% solution as a mouth, throat, nasal rinse, and a couple drops in the eyes 4 times a day. And they reported an 88% reduced risk of death in that study. And so that it's published in a very obscure journal, and so you can question that, but the numbers are pretty impressive. Now, when you use Lugol's, do you do rinses with it, or
are you going to question the very prominent journal that published negative articles on hydroxychloroquine and that was retracted because they made up the data? So as far as publishing in a journal, I wouldn't have journal envy here. I'm not poo-pooing it. I'm just saying other people might. So you know what? That's journal envy, and so much of the stuff published in the major journals have been found to be fraudulent. The New England Journal of Medicine's got its hands in this with some recent articles that I think you were writing about. Anyways, but go ahead.
Yeah. Well, so in that case, we're talking about rinsing the mucosal surfaces with 1% povidone iodine. Your use of iodine is a little bit different, right? You're using Lugol's, first of all, and are you doing rinses with it with your patients, or do you just put it in the nebulized solution?
If you think about a nebulizer, you're going to, whether they wear a mask or they take it through their mouth, they're going to get it all through their nasal cavity, their oral cavity, and down into their bronchioles and the upper part of their lungs. So I haven't used it that way just because I've been using it this way. And again, This is therapy for 20 years. So I didn't feel any great urge to have them do that.
Right. And what's the concentration? Do you know the percent concentration there, or you do it by drops?
No, it's 6. Well, it's 1 drop of 5% Lugol's, which is 6.25 milligrams in that 0.03% peroxide solution. I can't give you. No one's asked me this question before. I can't do it off my head.
Yeah, we'd have to calculate it.
Like 6.25 milligrams of iodine in there, which is, into that whole respiratory tree.
Do you have any experience with? Because one question that people ask me a lot is, if I want to copy the paper that's using 1% povidone iodine, how do I translate that into Lugol's? Do you have any basis to translate that, or do you just always
is the oxidized form of iodine? So iodine can be in an oxidized state iodine or a reduced state iodide. And in my iodine book, I've been writing about, for best whole body use of iodine, it's best to use both oxidized and reduced form of iodine because different tissues concentrate different forms of iodine. But in the case of a viral infection or a bacterial infection, iodine really has the antiviral and antibacterial effects that iodide, the reduced form, doesn't have. So the answer to your question is no, I can't give it to you offhand, but I would bet that because it's 40-60, let's just call it 50-50 and get close. But so there's 50 milligrams or so of iodine in that 1 drop of 5% Lugol. So you're nebulizing 3 milligrams of iodine into that. I believe that's going to be more than a 1% povidone, but I have to quietly, with a pen and paper, think about this for a little bit.
Right. But you don't do that, right? You've never had a need to do those rinses because you've always used the nebulizer. Is that right?
I was just a nebulizer.
Yeah. Okay.
I have had people, not so much when they're sick, but just for sinus problems and for sinus drainage, use a neti pot with quarter teaspoon of unrefined salt and then 1 drop of Lugol's 5%. So again, another 6.25 milligrams of a combination of iodine and iodide in that neti pot and drain their sinuses. But I didn't use it the way you were talking about, where they're gargling with it and then putting it in their eyes.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting. The one, I guess, if you have a 1 drop of a 5% in a neti pot, that's got to be diluted like 100-fold, right? I'm thinking one drop in a neti pot. Neti pot's got to have probably a lot more than 100 drops in it.
Oh yeah. It's got
so it's, but I think povidone iodine, most of the iodine is bound to the povidone, and so I think when you're rinsing it through, if it's a 1% solution, I think that might be equivalent to like a drop of Lugol's, because all the iodine's free versus all bound up with the polymers.
It's got to be closer. I'll bet you there's a little more iodine in that Lugol's. Yeah. I don't know. It's
yeah. Okay. I know you got to go soon, so let's go through just a handful of rapid fire questions. Just get your take on a handful of things. So, I know. So first of all, I know that I don't know if you got a chance to at the Weston A. Price conference. Did you get a chance to stay for the second day by any chance?
I had to leave for the second day.
Yeah. Okay. So the second day, there were a number of talks of people just questioning whether this thing is even a virus. So I guess the rapid fire question is, if you have 4 choices: natural virus, lab leaked virus, bioweapon, or not a virus. Which one?
Yeah, I guess, first off, I want to hear your answer after I answer.
Sure.
First way I'll answer that question is, what the hell does it matter? What I think. And, you're seeing these sick people, something is happening. So something is happening. And, we can talk about 5G causing all this. You can talk about that it's exosomes and this virus has never been isolated. Some people say something happened. So it was interesting. It was interesting that one lady comes in my office sick, clinically sick, and then 4 days later, bang, 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 90% of us have COVID, and we have antibodies afterwards to verify what we think we had. Something was passed to us, unless, all of a sudden a 5G tower popped up on my building that,
right.
So I what do I think? I think we were studying it. We were sending money. We know that's the case. There's a money trail, and they were studying, strains of SARS, and it seems to me pretty clear from what I've read that it was probably a biodefense project that got out. That's my view. So, does it really matter in the long run what I think? Probably not, but that's what I think. I thought that from the beginning. And I thought that I am a little more, I know this is not really the right analogy to use here, but maybe the glass half full here and not so dire, that I think that I hope it wasn't unleashed purposely. I don't think the Chinese would unleash it on their own. If it was unleashed purposely, it would have been unleashed on us first, if that was sort of the theory behind it. But I think it was just I think it was a human error. And I think we were studying it. I think we were modifying it. I think that was inappropriate, and we should have congressional hearings and testimonies and trials and all that. But, do I think it's a virus? Yes, I think it's a virus, but,
All right. Well, since you asked for mine, I would pick, out of the 4, I would pick lab leaked virus as my go-to. And I'm open to other things. I did go to all the It's Not a Virus talks, and I thought they did have some good points, but just not good enough. I think the same reasons you brought up, not quite good enough to explain away the transmission dynamics where it seems to spread like a virus. So I think I think at the end of the day, if I were to fully research, has it been perfectly isolated, et cetera, I would probably say, no, it hasn't, but there's a lot of things that you would have to explain away that really make it look like a virus. And then, I do default to, it was probably leaked out of a lab by mistake due to poor quality control. But I just finished reading Bobby Kennedy's new book, and there are some definite indications that there could have been some, at a minimum, deliberately leaving the quality control in a poor condition. So, for example, the CEO of the French company that built the building in Wuhan, in 2018, it was revealed that they had not built the air ventilation properly that they would need for a biosafety level that they had. And that guy I think he went on, if I remember correctly, to work for Moderna shortly after that. And so there's definitely some weird things going on in terms of, who, like, there should be some investigations of it. But I lean towards accidental lab leak. Okay, a couple others, and feel free to say you pass on these if you don't want to answer them. But what's your position on COVID vaccines?
I think patients should be educated on the positives and negatives of every therapy and make their own best decision, including COVID vaccines.
And what about COVID vaccine mandates?
Well, I think that if we're going to have a mandate, we should have good scientific research behind that, and the data should be presented, and the policy. I mean, not the policy. The educate us on this, and I think that if the information's out there, then and it's an appropriate vaccine, and it stops transmission, and the benefits are going to far outweigh the risks, then maybe we need a mandate. I think that's up for us to decide, and as a people, and we should have good data behind anything before we mandate it. And I think that it depends on what you mean by mandate. Look, if we're gonna,
do you think we have that data, or do you think we don't have that data yet?
Well, it depends on what you mean by mandate. Do you not leave your house like they're talking about in Austria? If you don't get vaccinated,
you get fired from your job.
Well, I mean, look, I think that if you're going to mandate it, then there should be some liability that is out there, that if there's a problem, that if I have to get mandated to get some medical therapy, and if I get sick from that medical therapy, I should be able to sue.
You should be able to sue, yeah.
For damages.
Yeah. There's definitely some kind of ethical problem with pairing a mandate with a total complete liability shield. Yeah. Something's wrong with that.
What the hell's that? So it's so anyways, that's what I think about that.
Yeah. Okay. Well, I know you got to go, so let's leave it here. It was great talking to you. Thank you so much for coming on. Where should people go to find out more about you, and where can they find the paper that you can give me the link to that paper, and I'll put it in the show notes. But where should people go if they want to find out more about you?
Well, first off, Chris, I read all your stuff. You're really write well, and you're very reasonable and very you support. I like how you cite everything, and I like your analysis of research and how it changes over time.
Thank you.
How you think through things, and you're constantly thinking. And I appreciate everything you've done over the years. I love getting your emails, and through COVID, I was learning a lot from you. When it was coming through, and
thank you. I appreciate that.
So my website is drbrownstein.com, drbrownstein, BROWNSTEIN.com, and I've got 16 books there, and had a lot of blogs there. Those are gone for right now. And perhaps if we can, before I guess we talk about mandates, maybe we can get our dust off the First Amendment and allow free speech to reign again.
We'll have to talk about them, yeah.
And
for sure.
Get some of our rights back that has been stripped from us over the last 20 years. That we don't get back. 9/11 happens, we lose rights there, and that's a Republican president. We lose rights. Republican, Democrat, doesn't seem to matter.
Yeah.
Take them away. We just sit there like sheep, just taking it. And I'm hoping we finally stand up and say we've had enough, because and there's a different energy out there now. I think people are getting more irritated, and you know, I say 2022, I think it'll be different. I hear the irritation in people out there, and I think that there's, eventually they're going to push us too far where we're going to say, why can't we debate this? Why can't we debate things? Why can't we talk about things?
Yeah, for sure.
So, I gave a talk at the conference that I chaired in Texas on vaccines, and consensus in medicine, the Federation of State Medical Boards, the AMA, and the nurses, whoever the nurses associations, all put out the same letter that said anyone talks against the consensus in medicine should be subject to censure or something like that. So I gave a talk about consensus in medicine over the years. So the consensus in medicine was use Vioxx when it came out. I didn't use Vioxx because I read the package insert. I looked up the literature behind it. I saw that it inhibited prostacyclin, which is a prostaglandin that causes vasodilation. So I thought, hey, you inhibit that for people that need that to keep their arteries dilated, they're going to get strokes and heart attacks. I'm not prescribing this thing. And Merck put out Vioxx, and the powers that be promised us that Vioxx wouldn't cause GI bleeding and like the other NSAIDs, and it's safer. And what do we have to show for that? We got over 50,000 dead and 100,000 strokes and heart attacks in the US alone, and from an approved drug. And, consensus in medicine in the 50s was smoking was accepted and smoking was recommended to control anxiety. And I have articles from the AMA recommending, certain cigarettes, I don't know, I have the ads for them, when I lecture about it. There's a whole bunch of consensus in medicine that it was wrong. And, and I don't know, I don't want a consensus in medicine. I want people to debate things. And then, let's convince.
Agreed.
let's convince, especially when it comes to medicine. When you're blocking enzymes and poisoning enzymes and blocking receptors, it's not so easy to predict how the body's going to respond to this stuff. And, my experience over 30 years of practicing medicine is the less prescription medicines people take, generally the healthier they are. And there's a time and a place for prescription medicines, but, the more they take, the more they interact with each other, and they don't interact nicely with each other most of the time. So anyways, that's my short soapbox with it. And I have a nice talk on consensus in medicine I'd like to give sometime.
All right. Totally agree. Completely agree. On all counts. Pharmaceuticals definitely have a place, but they shouldn't be our first go-to. And open dialogue, free expression is the number one core thing I stand for. So,
what did our founders want that they weren't getting? That they came over here and gave up everything for it. That was the First Amendment. The reason it's the First.
What did they say? What did they say? It was better to die than to not have.
The First Amendment.
That's right. All right. Thank you so much, David. This was absolutely great, Dr. Brownstein. So
thanks, Chris. Let's do it again.
Looking forward to next time.
Thank you. During this critical time where our freedom of health and freedom of speech are both in imminent danger, and where tens of thousands of people are facing imminent job losses as a result of medical mandates, I am devoting my analytical skills full-time toward the battle for health freedom. This includes working directly with lawyers in lawsuits over mandates, lockdowns, and the current standard of care, scientifically analyzing safety, efficacy, and the risks of mandated medical treatments, you know what we're talking about, and their alternatives, as well as any way to mitigate their harms, and publishing my findings in scientific journals and sharing them with you. It is my firm conviction that this is the most important gift that I can offer the world right now, and I view this as a needed public service. I would be extremely grateful if you could support me during this time. At chrismasterjohnphd.com/support, you can purchase one of my information products in amounts ranging from $3 to $30, or take advantage of my consulting services for more. You can also make a purchase using one of my affiliate links to buy something you would have bought anyway at no extra cost to you. And finally, at chrismasterjohnphd.com/donate, you can make a donation in any amount. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe as well. And I thank you for your support.